I loved Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. This film, from beginning to end, was non-stop action. And yes, there were moments where there wasn't action, but those moments were dedicated to telling the pieces of exposition that we needed to hear. And while I think those could have been trimmed down, they're few and far between. Like, there's more action in this film than there is exposition. And when we get to the third act, and the final, set of everything going on, it's just action for around 50 minutes, and I love it so much. This movie is a solid 7 out of 10. Blue Beetle, the third outing for DC for the year 2023, and you know what? Honestly, I found it pretty enjoyable. Blue Beetle is a film that didn't have the best things going for it. It came out during the actors' strike, so the actors couldn't really promote the film, and it also, was originally made for HBO Max, so it definitely had that kind of feeling of being a lower budget film. Still though, I think Blue Beetle is a fine addition to the DC lineup of films. It's really enjoyable, it's pretty family friendly, and it's got the same tropes that you would expect of, oh, there's this bad guy, there's this good guy, there's this character that is mixed between the two. It's got the tropes that you would expect, but I still think it's a really enjoyable watch. I do think that if you sit down to watch this movie, not trying to hate it, that you will genuinely find some enjoyment in it. And it's honestly one of those films where I'm kind of sad that it didn't make more at the box office, because it deserved to. It really did. It was a really good film and was a lot better than some of the other superhero outings this year. Alright, The Creator. This is another film like Oppenheimer to me, where it was great cinematography, good acting. I felt like the director had a vision here, but it didn't hit me. This film just kind of fell flat for me. I had friends who found it enjoyable and who noticed the AI stuff in it and everything, and I'm glad that they were able to watch it and were able to get through it, but for me, I was just bored out of my mind. The Marvels. Now, this was another interesting one. This is a superhero film that I went in hoping that I would enjoy it, hoping that I would get some multiversal shenanigans with the incursions. I'd heard there was a big post-credit scene. I wanted some great comedy, and on top of that, you had strong female representation. The film, though, is honestly pretty terrible. It is one of the worst Marvel films they have ever made, and the box office is representing that. This film is not good. I find it to be very enjoyable. I would watch it again, but it is not what I think Marvel needed it to be, especially right now. Especially in this period where there's all these pieces coming out criticizing the studio, and they're having to delay projects and stuff. Having this, I can't believe I'm saying this, having this train wreck come out at this time was a terrible idea. I already didn't like the fact that they weren't delaying it with the actors' strike, but I don't know if it would have helped much. Like, this film is just really, really bad, and I'm sorry that I'm having to say that. I enjoyed it, but even in the theater, I felt like the editing was choppy. I felt like there were scenes that could have been completely cut out. There's rumors of scenes that were going to be in it that they cut out that I wish they would have included. I think The Marvels is a mess. And I don't know if I should blame the studio or the director. I honestly feel like Marvel Studios really messed this one up. And it really feels like they should have had more scenes in here. Like, this film should have been extended by maybe another hour. Maybe it did need another hour. But please, we did not need a dance musical number, and we did not need a scene of cats eating people. This film is just a mess, and I enjoy it. I want to be very clear. I do enjoy The Marvels, but I just think it's awful. At the same time, it's kind of like, I don't know, The Flash. I love that movie, but you know what? I get that there are terrible things in it, that the writing is awful in some places. That's what I'm saying with the Marvels, except it's the entire film, because my goodness, this film had like a $300 million budget, and still it feels like a complete dumpster fire. This is not where Marvel needs to be headed. I'm not saying Marvel is a dumpster fire completely, but they better get their act together, because this film was really rough. Alright, and another film to discuss is The Hunger Games: Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes. Now, at the time of recording this, on December 1st, actually, this is the last film that I actually went and saw in a theater. So everything after this will be recorded after this date. But going into this Hunger Games film, I was excited for it. It looked good. I'd heard great reviews about it. And you know what? It is a great film. It honestly is up there with some of the other Hunger Games movies. It really is a strong film. I just think it falls apart in the third act. And I think the reason why is because they have to hit some specific checkboxes in order for it to connect with the other Hunger Games films. For example, they have to get rid of Lucy Gray Baird because obviously she isn't in the other movies. They have to turn Snow into a villain because that's the whole point of the story. It did feel like in the third act that they were just trying to hit the checkboxes. So that is what I will say is a big negative. It felt like the third act could have been done better. But I liked all the acting, and I still thought the third act was enjoyable. This is a really good movie. It isn't bad, it doesn't feel like a cash grab, it does genuinely feel like they were trying to take us back to the world of the Hunger Games. Just this one stumbles a little bit. But in other areas of the plot, it exceeds, like, what it should be. It is a really good film, it's just got some rough spots. I'm just going to say it, Wonka is perfect. Everything about the film is perfect. The wholesomeness, the spirit, the casting, the lead star's performance, the music, the choreography, the runtime, everything about this movie is pitch perfect. The DC Extended Universe has finally concluded. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom came out this last weekend, and I went ahead and saw the film, and I'm honestly going to say that I had a really good time. Going into this film, reading all the reviews online, hearing all the production mishaps, and the studio heads changing multiple times even though the film was completely finished in terms of filming and reshoots and whatever may be gossip, whatever may be truth, I didn't know if I was going to like this film. There were also other factors that I had to consider. But, coming out of it, I really liked Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I really did. It feels like the sequel to Aquaman. It doesn't feel like Shazam! Fury of the Gods, where everything about the first film they take in the completely wrong direction. In fact, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom feels like a perfect continuation, with obviously some plot holes, and I think issues that could be fixed, and some changes I like, but is it an enjoyable superhero film? Yes, it is. It is really enjoyable. I love the action scenes in this. I love the music. I love the visual effects. I know they may not be the best, but for me, I found them to be really enjoyable. I also like the pacing of the action scenes, and how there was comedy every now and then. I don't like that all the time, but there were some pretty funny jokes in the film. I will say, though, that I think the beginning is probably the part that struggles the most. I found myself bored in the theater, waiting for them to just get to Aquaman and the other characters we care about. We spend 20 minutes with these other characters setting up the plot for the film. I'm not saying that plot setup isn't important, I'm just saying I felt like it was taking way too long. I don't know how they would have fixed it, but maybe they could have tried to reshoot some things. Maybe they should have started with Aquaman and then transitioned to what the villains were doing or whatever. I don't know. I found the beginning to be long, and the conclusion, while I like it, I think it's a nice conclusion, you know, the final battle. They do something in this film that I don't want to spoil, but the way they do it feels very much like a cartoon show. Maybe not a cartoon animated show, but like something you'd see on television. That could just be me, but I don't really like the way they settled things, or the way they tried to display things. They're trying to display these characters' emotions and thoughts, but the way they do it feels very much like a, I don't know, like a just cheap way to do it. But still, I found Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom to be very enjoyable, and that's my honest opinion. Now, I will address the fact that there are definitely deleted scenes for the film. We did see a clip where Jason Momoa and Ben Affleck were together for a scene. That isn't in here. I would like to see that put back in. But for the film we got in theaters, I think it's solid. A solid film. The Boys in the Bow is another great film. It's inspiring. It talks about these boys who were just like you and me, but not at the same time. They had hard lives, they had an education, but they had the gumption, the motivation to want to be something more, whether that was for financial gain or just because they felt fit for the job. And through their trials and tribulation and their countless efforts, they eventually, you know, were part of this boat team. And this film is about their story. The Boys in the Boat is based off fact, and I think this film does a great job at creating a compelling, inspirational narrative. The cinematography is beautiful in this film. I think there's really some shots that should be seen in cinemas. And I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it wasn't filled with all of the crud that's in a lot of Hollywood films nowadays. Just, I'm glad that it was what it was. I think it's a fine film. Alright, so reviewing The Color Purple is going to be harder than most of these films. Because if you just rank this new Color Purple adaptation as it being on its own, then I think you've got a really solid film. If you rank it in terms of being a musical, is it good or bad, I think you've got a solid musical here. If you're trying to say, is this film better or worse than the original, I honestly think the original will give you what this film sort of lacks. The Color Purple is a very dark and intense story. In fact, it was more intense than I had thought going into it, and I didn't feel that as much in the musical adaptation. I felt like that edge was kind of taken off. I think it was because they added all these different story ideas. They changed a lot of things. They cut scenes. They added scenes. They changed it a lot from the original novel. But I don't know, like, I did really enjoy the new version of The Color Purple. I really did. I think it's a fun film. I don't think it's overly uplifting like Wonka, but I do think you will have a good time if you go and see this.